Hello, Night Nation. Trace Trelko here. Welcome to the Sons of UCF Live. 35 days until UCF kicks off the 2021 season. Tonight, we're talking about the defensive line. We also have the very latest on the Big 12's war of words with ESPN, and we're answering your questions. No cease and desist orders for these guys. Let's welcome in the Sons of UCF, Adam and Mike. Gentlemen.
Trace, where's Sammy Kincaid?
You like that little cameo, didn't you? That was pretty good.
That's the whole reason I showed up tonight. I thought Sammy would be here. What a disappointment. Mike, I don't know what to say.
It's the most interesting offseason in the history of offseasons, so at least we got that going for us, right?
That has certainly been the case. It is an offseason with plenty of news. Before we get to the latest with the Big 12, the big scheduling news announced, of course, you had Florida UCF officially announced earlier in the week, and then facing off against the Big 10 now, Maryland, in a home-and-home with the Terps. Your reaction, do you like that, a return of that Maryland series that was on the schedule a couple of years back?
I mean, obviously, I'd love to see a new team, right? I mean, we just played Maryland recently, so if I'm being selfish, I'd love us to spread it around and get another kind of team. But obviously, Maryland's an up-and-coming program. Mike Locksley is there from Alabama. They had a decent year last season. Tua's brother is the quarterback. I don't think he'll be there in 25, but they are a program that's been recruiting better lately. So, yeah, I don't mind going into Big Ten country and playing the Terps again. Again, if I was being selfish, I would love to see somebody we haven't played recently, but I think it's a nice little home-and-home with Maryland.
Yeah, I don't mind the Maryland one either. It was an exciting game the first time in Orlando. I think it was double overtime in McKenzie's first start, where he fumbled about 12 times. And then, of course, the time when we went up there and we beat them up pretty good. So we're even 1-for-1, and we can redo it again now and see who the better team is, I guess, almost 10 years later.
Terry Mahajer filling out that schedule a little bit, and depending on what happens with the Big 12, the AAC, perhaps all of these scheduling concerns will go away. The news late this afternoon, the SEC votes shockingly 14-0, all member schools voting to invite Oklahoma and Texas to join the SEC. And ESPN responding to Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby's cease and desist letter. I opened up referencing that in mentioning you, the cease and desist letter sent by Bowlesby to ESPN. Stop interfering with all of these things. ESPN out with a statement saying, the accusations you have made are entirely without merit, apart from a single vague allegation that ESPN has been actively engaged in discussions with at least one other unnamed conference, which we believe is the American, which ESPN disputes. Your letter consists entirely of unsubstantiated speculation and legal conclusions. To be clear, ESPN has engaged in no wrongful conduct, and thus there is nothing to cease and desist. All about lawyers now, isn't it?
I just like that. I'm sure some lawyer got paid like 6 figures to write that one email. So kudos to you lawyers out there. Listen, you guys all know I'm a huge fan of 90210, a nice little soap opera. This may be better because we've got petty letters, we've got accusations, we've got behind the back stuff, we've got people talking to other people, we've got people flirting with other places. This has all the intrigue you would want in your daytime novella on TV. So I'm here for all of it. Here's what I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I feel bad for the however many of you who are listening to us now who think that you're going to tune in and me, Mike, and Trace are going to give you some insight because we have no idea what's going to happen. All we know tomorrow, the Big 12 ADs are going to meet and decide, quote unquote, what's next. Whatever that means, I don't know. Obviously, is the AAC, is Mike Oresco on the offensive? Will there be just a disbanding of conferences altogether? I have no idea what to expect, and nobody else out there really does either. So all I know is I'm going to tune in like I'm watching a good old 90210 soap opera because this is really good live drama and intrigue.
And it's just getting started. This is just the first domino of these two schools. I'm not surprised if the SEC goes out and grabs whoever else they want. Everybody can talk about grant of rights all they want, contracts, this and that. Nothing seems to scare these guys. They'll go after any school in the country and pluck them and try to take them into their conference. Who knows exactly what's going to happen next? The Big 12 looks like it's going up in flames. That's something we thought we were headed there, and now it seems like all those schools are heading towards us. But 2 days from now, everything could be different.
2 days, 2 minutes from now. There was a lot of late night news breaking on Twitter last night about this. Bob Bowlesby saying that while they do not like what has happened today, they plan on welcoming the fan bases from Oklahoma and Texas over the next 4 years. Do you think that's going to be the case? Is this really going to be 4 years that they're in this league? As it shakes out, we've got a lot of ask the Suns questions coming up later on in the show. As this shakes out, though, do you feel removed a week from now that UCF is in a better position than it was when this news first broke last week?
I don't know about better. I'd say the same, or maybe even a tad worse, right? Because as these musical chairs fall around, I mean, if you want to read the conspiracy theory leaves, it seems as though ESPN is trying to nuke the entire Big 12. Some would tell you that that's to get out of a $1 billion contract. So if that's the case, then what do those Big 12 teams become? Do they come to the AAC? And does that then make them a power conference? Do they combine with the Pac-12? Does this become a Power 4 now and we're still boxed out? So I think the dissolution of the Big 12, which I think we maybe thought was an option last week, but now it seems like it may be on the doorstep of happening, hurts another avenue UCF had. So now it's really a forceful American conference, or does the ACC come calling? I think maybe those are the two options now, because it feels like the Big 12 is just on the doorstep to nowhere at this point.
If you would have given me the option of us joining the Big 12 with the remaining 8, and say us and 3 other American schools, Cincinnati, Memphis, and maybe Houston, I would have taken that instead of having these guys come over this way. And we still are stuck in the conference with East Carolina, Tulane, Tulsa, and the Cows. I was really looking forward to leaving the Cows behind. And now it seems like we may be stuck with them if this is the conference we stay in.
Well, there's so much rumors and talk. You know, it came out late last night, Dennis Dodd, I believe it was, saying that the AAC, being aggressive, wants all 8 of those remaining Big 12 schools. The AAC is at 11 now. Who imagined that the super conference might turn out to be the AAC? At least fans who've been clamoring for Mike Oresco, commissioner of the AAC, to be more aggressive, perhaps they're getting their wish here. Commissioner Oresco won't say much during next week's AAC Media Days, no doubt about this, but it does seem like with his position previously in television, ESPN and the like, he's well positioned to do something here. And I think fans of all of these programs looking to see what moves he may make as this unfolds.
Well, if you want to believe Bob Bowlesby and his fantastic signature line, this would be ESPN orchestrating that, right? I mean, that's the way Bowlesby made this seem, as though ESPN was kind of reaching out and trying to make some moves on behalf of others, meaning Oresco is just there picking the phone up. Now, again, Mike and I, and Trace, I think you a little bit as well, have been critical of Oresco and some of his lack of decisiveness in the past. So I guess I don't know how much credit I want to give him at this point. You know, if you want to believe the Big 12 letter, this was ESPN calling Oresco and saying, hey, what do you think about these 3 teams or 5 teams, whatever it was? But obviously, if he can go on the offensive now, this would be the time for him to show his mettle, and we'll see if he has something up his sleeve that he can pull off.
A lot of people celebrating Oresco the last couple of days. This guy's just a patsy. He's doing whatever ESPN tells him to do. Let's face it. He'll take whatever teams ESPN is willing to give him. But it's not like he's going out and plucking these schools. Yes, I said plucking again. It's not like he's going out and grabbing these schools. He's taking what he's given. And if ESPN wants to, after they add these Big 12 schools, if they want to take us and Cincinnati and take them and move them to this ACC, there's nothing he can do about that either.
Well, we've gotten quite a few questions about this coming up in the Suns mailbag. We will widely speculate there. Perhaps Mike will find a way to work in the word pluck again later on in the show. Shifting a little bit to football, we've been previewing the offense. Again, UCF football out with a Twitter statement today. Where will you be in 35 days? Of course, Mike planning the big tailgate that details are still coming out on. But we shift to defense this week. The big question that I asked on Twitter, what area on UCF football's defense are you most concerned about? Do you have the most questions? Defensive backs, 43%. 37% for the linebackers in the position group we're looking at tonight. Defensive line, just 20% concerned about that. As I looked at the players on the defensive line, I feel like we've got a lot of depth there.
Yeah, I mean, I think even though we've got a lot of new guys back there, and obviously the D-line wasn't necessarily as stout last year as we wanted to. It feels like with the depth we have, I think 2 years back, at least I always joked about it being kind of a hockey lineup where, 4 guys in, 4 guys out, and we could continue to rotate. Feels like we're back to that kind of standard again. And this poll makes sense to me. I think, I talked about it on our show this week that the back 7 is really an area that I'm interested to figure out how we shore up. You know the names, some of the pedigree, you've seen them play, but this is the year now that we're going to need someone to kind of emerge from that back 7 to be a leader, like a Richie Grant, like a Titus Davis, dare I even say like a Shaquem Griffin. And so I think that the D line is probably the most consistent, at least on paper, position group that we have on the defensive side.
I'm surprised defensive line got 20% of the vote on this. I thought for sure it's that's the best unit on the defense. The secondary, as we know, is young, coming in from last year. Some guys that got some experience, but now have to grow up quickly. The defensive line, like you guys have mentioned, I think we have 2 rotations of guys that can come in and just stay fresh all game.
I know, Mike, you like Big Cat. Is he who you expect to emerge to be the biggest force on this line?
All the hype in the preseason goes around the Big Cat. Yes, he's the guy you want to see sacking the quarterback, getting pressure on the quarterback, but also Tremont Morris-Brash on the other end. We've been seeing this guy now for the last couple of years. Last year, there was questions about his conditioning coming into the season. He's a guy that was very highly touted coming out of high school. If the 2 of them can be edge rushers like we think they can be and put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, that's going to make the job for the secondary and everybody else a lot easier. And it's going to make the defense very formidable.
And
Adam, what about you? Who are you looking for here?
Yeah, let's not discount Kalia Davis. So he's a guy who did not play in 2020. Here's his 2019 stats for those who forgot. He had 8 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. Those 8 tackles for loss would have put him number 1 last season for UCF. Those 3 sacks would have put him tied for 2nd on the team. So a productive player that we saw in 2019. Obviously sat out 2020. By all accounts, he's kind of fresh, reinvigorated, ready to go. I think if you think about the 3-headed monster that you could rotate there on that inside between him, Ricky Barber from Western Kentucky, and then Cam Good, I think those are 3 formidable guys that you can keep rotating in and around. And then don't forget about Anthony Montalvo, who is just all effort, all energy. The kid's always running around the field. That's a formidable sort of big middle center of the line there. And if those 3 guys can step up and Kalia Davis becomes what he was in 2019 again, that's a formidable bunch that will really stuff the run. If they get pressure up the middle and force, quarterbacks to the outside, I think we have speed on the outside with Saliscar, with Big Cat. And so that could certainly be a big help this year. So Kalia Davis, I guess, to me is the linchpin and what that might be.
Yeah, stopping the run, obviously the most important thing. That's going to set up the pass rushings on 3rd and long with the other guys that you mentioned on the edge. And Saliscar, remember Saliscar came in, had one of the best games ever for freshman in their very first game with an interception, forcing a fumble. I expect big growth out of him this year too. And the linebackers now is probably the most veteran unit with Eric Gilliard and Tatum Bethune, older guys now that have to step up into leadership roles. Those guys need to grow up too.
With 2020 being such a forgettable year with COVID and the impact on the season, at least one good thing that came out of it was so many guys, you mentioned Southstar, getting game day experience across this bumpy 2020 season. You'd expect those sorts of game day action to pay dividends here in 2021.
Yeah, you hope, right? I mean, he got a lot of run last year. Even, we don't talk a lot about Landon Woodson. He's an older player, but he had 5.5 tackles for a loss last season, just a quality veteran. Noah Hancock got some playing time last year. I think he played really well. Stefan Zayas, who I think was pretty good the year prior. I think he battled some injuries this last year. So I think you're right, Trish. You have those guys who maybe wouldn't have been your top line starters that got a lot of run last year that I think played well, that you got to hope now when you add them into the mix, and they're only going to get, instead of the 10 snaps they got, maybe they get 6 snaps. So do they go harder on those 6 snaps? Are they trying to make the most of those opportunities? So I think we talk about it every position group. Competition breeds success in some respects. I think that a lot of the guys here who play really well, guys who've been on the field and want to get back on the field, I think this could really be the strongest position group that UCF has overall throughout the entire team.
On our show the last few weeks, we had some guys that played in 2011, 2012, 2013, Brandon Alexander, Terrence Plummer, and they talked to us about how in 2011 they took their lumps on defense. Remember, that was a down year coming off a good 2010 season, but those lumps helped them in 2012 and 2013 build that defense into what it became.
Of course, there are a lot of questions that we don't know. What is the defense going to look like under a new coaching staff, a new defensive coordinator? We've had the several years experience with Randy Shannon. That's a wild card in all of this. And I don't know that we're going to get a lot of answers over preseason camp as it opens next week, or that will be shared by coaches. But you got to think that it's a renewed energy now, right? It's no longer this division between offense and defense. Heupel walled off, Shannon's guys walled off. There seems to be a fresh energy here. This is a position group, the defense, the defensive line, a lot of upside potential in this 21 season.
Yeah, on the show this week, Mike and I did our big three storylines to watch this upcoming season. And the one storyline that I picked, I think was my third choice, and I just called it fun. And just did the guys have the fun back, the camaraderie, the energy? 2020 was a rough year, I think, for any number of reasons that we could sit around and talk about. So is the fun back? Is the energy back? It seems like, T. Will is just a human Red Bull, and his energy is infectious. It seemed like the guys really enjoy being around him. So I think that's the thing that I'm most interested in this race is, will that spark come back? And this is not meant to be disrespect to Heupel and the coaching staff, but it felt like in the previous years, we did a lot of gimmicky things to have fun, right? We threw a giant tarp on the field and called it a slip and slide, right? We threw water balloons at each other, right? We tossed the egg around, whatever it was. And while that stuff can be fun, I think natural fun and camaraderie is where I'd love to see if this team goes. And I think, this is a position group that, we know the personalities. We had Cam Good on the show. Anybody who names himself Big Cat has to have a personality. So I'm curious to see how this got gels together. But I think that fun and cohesiveness is really something that I'd be watching for, particularly as the fall camp opens up.
We've talked a lot about complementary football the last couple of years. I don't think we actually did it. The offense was out there scoring as fast as they could, and it hurt the defense. Now this year, Malzahn with a more professional offense, if we have a big lead late in the game, I see him running out the clock, keeping that defense fresh, and we have the guys to rotate in and out. So I expect a much better defense this year.
Yeah, I feel good about the defensive line. And, Mike, I share that with you that 20% of folks responding concern there. That's really the least on the defense that has my concern. Let's shift to linebackers next week as our position-by-position reviews continue, previews continue. We'll take a look at the linebackers, and, we'll see as we get closer, just 35 days out. Some other football news. How about the Aaron Rodgers saga in Green Bay? He returns, and then the boat, Blake Bortles, he goes out the door.
Yeah, first off, that Aaron Rodgers press conference was fascinating. If you haven't listened to that 30-minute soliloquy that he put on, that was actually pretty funny. Yeah, tough to see Blake lose that opportunity. Obviously, I think we all wanted him to get a chance. I think we knew he was a veteran filler on that squad, and maybe is a bit of a leverage from the Packers' perspective. Hopefully, he gets a chance to catch on someplace down the road, because obviously, I think we all feel good about Blake and want to see him get another opportunity.
Yeah, he's in a good spot. At quarterback, there's always a need. There's always injuries that pop up out of nowhere. As long as he stays in shape and they'll get another opportunity somewhere down the line this season, I believe.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this home opener in just 35 days. As we are on a Thursday night, it will be on a Thursday night. Let's talk a little bit more about the opponent, Boise State. Let's join now BJ Rains. He's the beat writer for the Idaho Press and BlueTurfSports.com. BJ, welcome into the Sons of UCF Live tonight.
Hey, appreciate you guys having me on. Thanks. This will be fun.
All right. Before we start talking about what Boise State's going to look like in 2021, so much has been happening in college football over the last week. What's your reaction to Oklahoma and Texas in this move to the SEC? And what do you think the impact is going to be on Boise State and the Mountain West?
Well, from a personal standpoint, I'm a little disappointed. Obviously, I'm a Kansas grad. I'm a Big 12 guy through and through. So disappointed to see the Big 12, kind of be on life support here. But I think it has a huge impact on Boise State. I think Boise State is now hoping that the 8 teams that are left in the Big 12 can stick together. And if they decide to add, 4, 6, and in a perfect world, maybe 8 teams and go to 16 teams themselves, I think they'd be one of the prime candidates if they could, come together with some of the American teams, maybe a BYU. I think Boise State, in 2016 applied to join the Big 12 the first time they were looking around at teams. So I think I think it could have a positive impact on them. And certainly I think they're going to be very curious to see if the Big 12 can stay together here and looks to add teams from the outside.
Well, BJ, let's talk about this 2021 Boise State team. Obviously, new head coach Andy Avalos, who takes over in the 6 degrees of separation concept here. Brian Harsin takes over for Gus Malzahn when Gus gets fired. Gus now at UCF. Andy Avalos, previously the defensive coordinator, is now at Boise. What kind of coach is Andy Avalos, and how and in what ways do you think he'll be different than what we saw under Brian Harsin?
Well, he's the first coach at Boise State in like 25 something years that has a defensive background. They've had an offensive head coach. The last four or five head coaches have all had offensive backgrounds. So that's certainly going to be different from that standpoint. Having a defensive guy being the head coach. He played linebacker at Boise State. He, was a longtime assistant coach at Boise State. Went to be the Oregon defensive coordinator for 2 years. So he's still familiar with the roster. He's still familiar with a lot of the players and obviously the surroundings in Boise. So I think that we'll have time will tell in terms of that standpoint, but certainly having a defensive guy, I think, is going to be a little bit of a change. But from a player's standpoint, they seem to love him. He's more of a player's coach, a little more laid back maybe than Brian Harsin was. So so far he's getting an A+ from everybody, and we'll find out once the season starts, what the results on the field look like.
We're obviously all excited to get this thing underway. The last thing we want is a cancellation. The big news out of UCF today, Gus Malzahn said about 70% of the team has been vaccinated. What's the numbers coming out of Boise? Are you guys have a higher percentage, or what's it like?
Probably a lower percentage, to be honest, right now. I know it sounds like they've got some work to do in that area at Mountain West Media Days in Las Vegas last week. The Mountain West said there was like 7 teams that were above 80%, and I confirmed that Boise State is not one of those. And Andy Avalos said, I think he didn't want to reveal the numbers, but I think he said that they, quote, had some work to do or something. So it sounds like that's something they're going to push. It's tough here in Boise because the case numbers are pretty low, and I think it might just be a little tougher to motivate some of these guys. But I think that now that the Mountain West has come out and said, you're going to have to forfeit the game, and you're going to have to continue to wear masks and test if you don't get vaccinated. I mean, they're kind of incentivizing it for players to get vaccinated. So I think that there's going to be a push that picks up here moving forward, and I think that number is going to raise. But right now, it's not where they want it to be and not where it should be.
Let's dig in a little bit more on the team. Are you expecting a quarterback battle this training camp?
Yeah, they got 2 guys, Hank Bachmeier, Jack Sears, both obviously are going for the job. And, Hank Bachmeier has been the starter both years when he's been healthy, but he hasn't always been healthy. He had COVID, missed a couple games last year. He missed 6 games his true freshman year. He kind of burst onto the scene true freshman year, first game in Tallahassee, led them on a comeback to beat Florida State on the road, and then just hasn't been able to get through a full season for whatever reason due to injuries and COVID and stuff. So I think he has a leg up going in. I would suspect that Bachmeier will win the job, but Jack Sears, the USC transfer, in the game he played last year against Air Force, was almost perfect. 17 for 20, 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. And they were really excited about him starting the next week against BYU when he got hit in the first quarter, helmet-to-helmet hit, and left the game, and then didn't get back in the rest of the season due to COVID and cancellations and other stuff. So both guys, I think, are in the mix. I think both guys will play. It's a new offensive coordinator, obviously a new staff, so they're trying to make this thing as fair as possible. But I think Hank Bachmeier has the edge, and I would be pretty surprised if he wasn't the guy that started Thursday night, September 2nd, down there at the Bounce House.
Yeah, you mentioned the new offensive coordinator, Tim Plow, the 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years for Boise. What differences might we see in offense this year?
Well, it's not really anything new to have them go into a new coordinator. They lose their coordinators, almost every year in terms of going to Power 5 coordinator gigs and things like that. I mean, if you're a team looking for an offensive coordinator, whoever the coordinator at Boise State is a nice place to start. So, Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach at Missouri, was a former offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator at Minnesota now, Mike Sanford. You can go down the line. So, Tim Plow was a finalist for the offensive coordinator at Baylor a year ago. Did not get that one. He is put up some crazy high offensive numbers at UC Davis at the FCS level. They led the Big Sky Conference and a lot of the national numbers in passing yards and total offense and things like that. We haven't been able to see a ton of it because they really dumbed it down in the spring game. I don't think they wanted to get too much of it out there, but it sounds like no huddling or very little huddling. It sounds like not much substituting. And I don't know if it's going to be as fast as the Oregon offenses in the past where they sprinted up to the line of scrimmage and snapped it as fast as they could. But it sounds like they're going to go. And the offensive line is talking about how much quicker it is. And there's not going to be a lot of time to get set at the line of scrimmage and survey things. It's going to be get to the line of scrimmage, hike the ball, and go. And it's supposed to have a lot of different options on every play for the quarterback to make decisions. And all the players say they love it and that it's going to put up a lot of points. And Tim Plow's kind of motto is hashtag is half 100. He said his goal every game is to get half 100 and wants to get to 50-point mark. And, Boise State is the highest scoring team in the country since 2000. So scoring points is something they obviously, are used to doing around here. And he wants to push that to another level this year. So I'm excited. We're going to see it just like you guys do on September 2nd, what it really looks like.
For the UCF fans that are not too familiar with the Boise players, who are the big playmakers we need to keep an eye on for that game?
Well, wide receiver Khalil Shakir is an NFL guy. He could have gone to the NFL last year, decided to come back number 2. He's Boise State's best offensive player. He's the number 1 receiver. They can give it to him on fly sweeps. He can line up in the backfield. He can do the wildcat stuff. Khalil Shakir is their best offensive weapon by far. A couple guys on defense. Riley Wimpy, a linebacker, number 44. He's one of those super seniors that came back for his 5th year. He's an all-league guy. And then Kekala Kaniho from Hawaii is a 5th-year senior. He's was a All-American last year. He's a guy that has a chance to do some things, and he's another 5th-year senior, super senior that decided to come back. And those are 2 guys that are just prototypical guys that are just perfect to head back for another year to lead that defense. And so those would be 3 guys. I mean, George Helani at running back rushed for 1,000 yards as well his freshman year and was hurt last year. They got four returning offensive linemen. But they feel pretty good about most of their team. They just said, the biggest question mark would be at corner, where they've got two new corners they have to break in. That's the big question mark on defense.
Yeah, let's continue a little bit with defense. Hard to evaluate the impact of COVID in 2020. Just 2 interceptions for the team. A lot of upside, it seems, for the Boise State defense, as we've been talking about UCF's defense. A lot of room for growth.
Yeah, I was looking did a story on that today, actually. I think it's Bowling Green, University of Massachusetts, and I think Miami of Ohio were the only team in the country last year that had less takeaways on defense than Boise State. They were literally almost dead last in the country. No fumble recoveries, and I think it was 3 interceptions. So they were the only team in the country that played at least 5 games that didn't have a fumble recovery. So I know that stuff sometimes is cyclical. Sometimes it's just the way the ball bounces, but they've been tired of us asking about it the last 6 months, since the season ended, with how bad the turnover numbers are on defense. So new defensive coordinator, almost an entirely new defensive staff. And so they're confident that's going to even out this year. And they're pretty confident that's going to turn the other way. But again, they're going to have to prove it on the field, because last year it was not very good. And like I said, 2 new corners, both their all Mountain West corners leave, and they got to try to fill those spots at corner this year.
All right, from the outside looking in, BJ, what is Boise's perception of UCF? What's the talk about this game? Is it a big game they're looking forward to? Are there are folks quote unquote scared of playing UCF? What's the UCF perception up there in Boise?
Oh, they love it. They can't wait. I think that they, from a fan perspective, Boise State fans kind of feel like they're the they still feel like they're the top group of 5 team. They feel like they're the one that kind of burst through and won the 3 Fiesta Bowls. And they still feel, the winningest team in college football history from a winning percentage margin. They kind of rolled their eyes. We're not huge fans of UCF doing the mythical national championship thing and all that, because they've had undefeated seasons with a BCS win and didn't even think about doing something like that. So I think from a fan perspective, the second this game came on the schedule, and the fact that it was only 2 years away and not like 10 years away, and some of the players playing in the game were going to be there 2 years from when it was announced, I think it was very exciting. A lot of Boise State fans are going down to the game. I've talked to a ton of them that can't wait to get down to Orlando for this one, and so I think they're really excited. I don't know if they want to shut UCF up, so to speak. I think they just want to have a chance to prove themselves, because the last couple of years UCF has done better than them, has the more recent success on a national stage. So I think they want to show that, hey, Boise State is still the group of 5 power, and I think that's something that Boise State fans are eager to settle it on the field, so to speak.
You mentioned how many fans are coming. Do you have an idea? I think we give out 3,000 away tickets. Do you think you fill out that allotment coming to Orlando?
Oh, I'd be surprised if they didn't. Yeah, I mean, Boise State's a national brand. They've got fans from all over, and they travel really, really well. I mean, this is kind of how Boise State has made their success in recent years, is they would play one big game like this and then kind of ride the momentum the rest of the season. And so they still have, Oklahoma State on the schedule, BYU. They've got some other big games, but this is kind of how they've made their history over the years, whether it be a Georgia or an Oregon State or all these teams they've played in the opening games of the season. Virginia Tech when they were top 10. So I think this is a game where fans are going to be excited. They're going to show up. You're going to see plenty of blue and orange in the stands, and I would assume that they'll sell out of the allotment and find a way to steal some other ones off the secondary market as well. They've been looking forward to this game for a long time, and being the opening Thursday night game on a national stage like that, I think it's a prime opportunity that they feel like to kind of, as I said earlier, show who they are, and I think the fans will show up in full force.
Yeah, you had an article out a couple of days ago where you talked about it may not be the biggest non-conference game that Boise's ever played, but it's up there, right? This is an attention-grabbing game, ESPN primetime against the two Titans here.
Oh, definitely. You look at the list of regular season games Boise State has played, and I was talking to some folks that are, have more tradition and more time in the city and with the program than me, just to kind of make sure I wasn't crazy thinking this. But I mean, it's certainly top 10, and it's probably top 5 in terms of the biggest regular season games that they've ever played. I mean, it's again, they're not on ESPN anymore. They don't have the contract with ESPN, so to get on ESPN, to be on the opening Thursday of the season, and then you look at the magnitude of the game. If you win the game, I know Cincinnati's obviously there as a top 10 team. But if you win this game, it propels you into the top 25, gives you the early lead, or at least the early, thing to have on your resume in terms of the race for the top group of 5 team. And so I think certainly it's a huge game for Boise State for a lot of reasons. And if they want to be that team that gets back to the Fiesta Bowl, and again, in Brian Harson's first year and in Chris Peterson's first year, they won the Fiesta Bowl both times. So a lot of fans are just expecting nothing less this year. They want to see it happen again. They're not going to give Andy Avalos any time to ease into this. And so certainly to have a huge game like this right out of the gate on a national stage to kind of prove themselves and prove to others that Boise State is here, and to have that on their resume for the rest of the season, a road win at Central Florida would be huge for them. So yeah, it's a they've had bigger bowl games, they've had some other championship games like that, but in terms of regular season games, this is right up there in terms of top 5 probably in the biggest in program history.
All right, BJ, when people find out that you cover Boise State, how long before they ask you about the blue turf?
It's usually, they ask about the blue turf, and then right away they usually ask, is it true about the birds diving onto the field and dying because they think it's water? That always comes up too, and that is a myth. They don't actually have to go to practice and clean up the dead birds off the field that nosedive into the water. That's not true. But no, that is before I can even finish telling them where I'm from, they say, oh, you're the ones that's the ones with the blue field. So it does come up very often, yes.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot now. Give us a prediction. How confident are you coming into this game?
Oh, I mean, I think Central Florida being the home team, they got a lot going for them. I think they have to be considered the favorite in this game. I know the spread has kind of fluctuated depending on where you look. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if Boise State went down there and won, but I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up, losing somewhere between 3 and 10 points as well. So I think it'll be a game. I think Boise State, they like I said, they play. This is what they're made for. They play well in these big games. Very rarely do they get blown out or just not show up in a marquee game like this. So you'll see the trick plays. You'll see the razzle dazzle. They'll be ready to go, and I would suspect somewhere in the 34-30, something like that. I'll say UCF. I'll say UCF wins a close one. Take
the over in that one. Will you be making the trip down to Orlando?
Oh yeah, looking forward to it. Staying right there by campus and looking forward to checking it out. I haven't missed a Boise State game in 8 years, so looking forward to getting down there and seeing what Orlando and UCF is all about. And I've heard great things about the Bounce House, so can't wait to see it in person.
Good deal. Well, we appreciate you stopping by the Sons of UCF Live. You can follow BJ, Idaho Press, BlueTurfSports.com, at BJ Rains, pumping out a lot of content, interview with coaches the last couple of days, and camp getting underway for Boise State. So look forward to following more of your coverage. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
No problem. Looking forward to seeing you guys down there in 5 weeks or so. It's going to be fun.
5 weeks. All right. See you, BJ.
Take care.
All right. We've been speculating about things, but to actually talk with someone that covers a team that we're going to see in 5 weeks in the Bounce House, now I'm excited about the start of this season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Boise State's a big name. I mean, it sounds like they're pretty confident in the squad they have coming back. They have a couple of veteran quarterbacks. A lot of newness is what I heard there. A new offensive coordinator, a new head coach, so we can relate. So it's kind of a new matchup. Scouting may be interesting, right? Because, is Boise watching Auburn game film? Are we going to be watching, game film from Andy Avalos' tenure and UC Davis, where Tim Plow was the offensive coordinator? So it could be a tricky first matchup for both teams. But obviously, you said it, Trace. It's a really nice primetime game. not even, being a UCF homer, but if I was just a college football fan, if I was skimming through the TV, I'd turn this on and go, oh, wow, this is interesting. So I think it's a nice eye-catching game for the country.
It's going to be interesting to see how the game starts out, which team kind of needs to catch their footing. If we get off to a hot start, I like our chances. But that's good. The first quarter is going to be very interesting in this game.
Definitely. Looking forward to it. Good to hear a little bit more about Boise State and a primetime matchup just 35 days out. A couple more football notes before we transition into some mailbag questions. Outland Trophy watch list. I know, Mike, you like the watch list. Offensive lineman Cole Schneider is on that. Another Charge on Tour stop added. Wall Street Plaza, downtown Orlando, Friday, August 13th. Media Day next Tuesday for UCF. Have an opportunity to talk with Coach Malzahn, and then 8 to 10 players in the Nicholson Fieldhouse, where you may have seen me strolling with Sammy Kincaid a few days ago. And then AAC Media Days. The UCF contingent includes Coach Malzahn, Dylan Gabriel, and Kalia Davis is the defensive representative. Those via Zoom all day on Wednesday the 4th. If my schedule permits, hoping to hop on for one or more of those sessions, which may give us a little bit of content for twonightsmedia.com that next week. So when you have media days, the opening of training camp, things are getting going. Interesting, by the way, the availabilities. It's Coach Malzahn every couple of days available to the media, and defensive coordinator Williams available every couple of days. So they're not going to be trotting out every coach, it seems, from the preliminary information that has been released. So we're getting closer, guys. Basketball notes, both today, AAC announcing men's basketball pairings. It's the home and home. The schedule resumes the way it used to be pre-COVID. UCF will go to SMU, that only in Dallas. SMU does not come to Orlando. Cincinnati comes to Orlando. UCF does not have to go there. And the women's basketball pairings, UCF will host Tulsa and Memphis, travel to ECU and SMU. Rest are home and home. So this getting closer too. Schedule's not out yet for basketball. Maybe by the time we're with you next week, we'll be able to pick over those a little bit. All right, mailbag time. We've got a lot of questions related to this Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC. But let's open up with Sublime_Night. I can't think of anything interesting going on. He says, so Oreos, what's your eating strategy? All together, split them, dunk, no dunk. Adam, I know you've got some picky food rules. Where are you at on Oreos?
I would be a dunk guy. I don't think I've had a glass of like whole milk in probably 5 years at this point. So I was previously a dunk guy. The problem became when the milk got low. I've got a large hand, so I had a hard issue getting things in there, right? So I would be a dunk guy. If anything, I would be a twist guy, but I haven't had an Oreo and I don't even know how long. So
the key is you got to have a short, wide bowl cup there to dunk the cookie in, and I just drop them in and wait a couple of seconds and then scoop them out. Sometimes if I have time, I'll open them up, lick the middle, and then put them back and then dunk that. But usually it's just dunk the whole cookie.
If you have time, are you eating Oreos under the gun usually? What do you mean if you have time?
I don't know. But you can't leave a box of Oreos. They're gone in a day. Is my house.
Did you see the viral story this week of people mixing Oreos with salsa? That
I heard
being
about it.
a new trend. Yeah, I don't. Let's get to some more serious questions. At UCF1, Big Ohana Eric. Okay, his question is, what end result would you most like to have happen with regards to the Big 12, UCF, AAC, and what end result would you least like to happen? I'll start with, I'd least like to join the Big 12 and then have the Big 12 implode. That seems to be of no interest to anyone. And I think that the AAC being aggressive here, I think ESPN, we talked about it off the top, really sticking it to the Big 12. It looks like the AAC stands to gain from this. Pick up some more TV dollars. They won't match what the Big 12 was making. Take in some of those Big 12 teams. Maybe not all of them. Maybe some of them migrate to some other conferences. But it looks like the AAC is primed to benefit from this. And perhaps it will be Power 5 with UCF in the AAC.
Yeah, I guess I'd least like to get boxed out of any potential move to a conference that allows us opportunities, right? And Mike and I talked about this on the show this week. I think what's important for all of us who are thinking about conferences, who are excited about this, you need to come up with your list of priorities. What's the most important thing for you joining a conference? Is it the revenue that's going to come from that? Because that's significant, right? I mean, we know that $20 million per school is TV contracts in some conferences. UCF and the American were at 7. So that revenue is significant. So is it revenue that we're after? Is it prestige? Do we want to be in the best conference ever, right? With a lot of history? Is it a conference with direct access to postseason play? What's your priorities in terms of what it is that you're looking for in a conference? I think that's your worst case scenario. For me, the worst case is being boxed out of all that stuff, right? I think best case scenario, again, I selfishly, I'd love to be in the ACC. I think that'd be a fun little matchup. It seems unlikely with 2 Florida schools already in the books that they would do something like that. But if you asked me to pick whatever I wanted, I might pick ACC. I think there could be some fun matchups there.
Yeah, worst case is we stay where we are. We add these Big 12 schools, but then they don't call it the P5 anymore. They call it the P4, and they still don't count us, right? And we're still on the outside looking in. I still think we had a hope we can move into a bigger conference, whether it's the ACC, the Big 10. Really, the SEC is going to turn out to be the one conference. And there's word today coming out before we even started the show that the FSU president is worried about maybe missing the boat on that, and them and Clemson going to the SEC, and SEC going to 30 teams plus and paying players and having collective bargaining agreements and basically being a professional league. If that happens and we still get left out of that, then we're still in a lower level of football, which that's what I'm most scared of.
At @facts_UCF, continuing with this theme, what percentage of the odds the Big 12 is a repeat of the Big East? Should we stay or should we go? It doesn't seem like that's the boat you want to hop onto right now. It seems like the Big 12 is in disarray. Bob Bowlesby flailing around, fired off emails and cease and desist letters. It does not seem like a man confident in his position. By the way, 2 weeks ago, he said he slept comfortably at night with no fears of realignment or expansion. He was blindsided.
Yeah, I think the old rule of thumb is you typically try to do things diplomatically, and that doesn't work. You get loud, right? So I think Bob Bowlesby is in the get loud portion of the proceedings, where now it's yell and scream and make all these demands, send letters, all that stuff. So percentage wise, I think you're 90% of the way to the Big 12 just imploding as it is. Do we want to stay or get out? Obviously, I'd rather not jump on a sinking ship of the Big 12. So I guess if I have to choose between staying in the American Conference and being whatever it is that's going to be, or jumping to a Big 12 and crossing our fingers and hoping for the best, I'd rather stay where we are.
Bowlesby's either blind or gullible, or I don't know what you want to call him, but he was on this playoff expansion committee with Sankey, the leader of the SEC, right? He's working closely with this guy behind doors. Meanwhile, Sankey's stabbing him in the back. Everybody saw the Big 12 implosion coming years ago when they didn't expand in 2016. He sat back, let this happen, and now he's going to deal with it. He's going to be out of a job in a couple days.
There's an old saying. There's a saying that if you have a group of friends and you don't know which one of you is the idiot, that means it's you. And I think that's where Bob Bowlesby is, right? In a group of commissioners, it wasn't sure which one is the idiot, and now he realized which one that was.
At Fear the Pegasus, Mike, you alluded to this. Will the SEC eventually, possibly sooner rather than later, become its own division of college football? Will it essentially ruin the sport as we know it? Everyone looking out for money, their own self-interest here, and you saw that in the last round of realignment. They boo-hoo about tradition while they work actively to destroy tradition and natural rivalries. You think about the SEC, it was where you could hop in the car and easily get between Alabama and Auburn and Georgia and Tennessee and see games. And now it's far-flung across the country. They care only about money and being on television, and you can see how they have kicked the can down the road, and now players asserting themselves a little bit more with name, image, and likeness. Heck, Saban mentioning his quarterback already has pocketed $1 million. It really is the NFL's feeder league. The NFL doesn't need a minor league. It has it has college football.
Yeah, I'm not even being funny, Travis. I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years the SEC isn't a spring football league, right? We've seen all these spring leagues try to do their thing, the CFL, the XFL, the AAF. Like, if you tell me if the SEC formed its own league and started play from February to June, they would get monster ratings and there would be a ton of money available. So I think, Mike was talking about the article with 30 team super conferences. Whatever you can put down on paper that you think maybe happen, I would not argue any of it. I wouldn't be surprised in 10 years if, the SEC isn't a direct competitor to the NFL in some respects, right? Because I think to Mike's point, there's money to be made. There's kids who want to play. Obviously, the NFL has rules and where you can go. And if you want to play football, you'll always find an avenue. I wouldn't be surprised if any of that comes true.
You mentioned the Alabama quarterback making $1 million. I mean, how far away are we from one player like that making more money than our entire athletic department? Our TV contract was making, what, $7 million? For one guy who's making $1 million? That's crazy to think about.
Well, Mike, you said, and we've been talking about image and likeness for a couple of weeks, whether a guy might opt to stay in rather than turn pro. Obviously, if you're making $1 million, you're probably an NFL prospect in the draft. But it does make you wonder, as some of these guys look at what their pro prospects might be, whether they're going to make more money just staying in college. At Brian W. Peterson, if the Big 12 falls apart, do you think that's going to have an impact on the potential for a 12-team playoff? Remember, that's not a done deal. Adam, you were cautious about that some weeks back, saying you'll believe it when you see it. It does seem like the SEC telegraphed this a little bit by wanting to open up the field. They see a day in which 6 of those 12 spots are theirs.
Yeah, I don't know that it impacts the 12 teams because you're right, Trace. I think the SEC, I read an article today or something on social media, about, Oklahoma obviously always had an easy path in the Big 12. Texas was never really back, but sometimes they were back. There was a year where Texas Tech was good, but Oklahoma has really kind of had the easy path in the Big 12 to get to the championship levels, if you will. That path is not going to be as easy in the SEC. And I can't imagine Oklahoma is like, you know what, we'll give up an easy path to go to play in a conference where we have no path. Now, I get money talks and money's everything, but I got to think that schools like or conferences like the SEC will want to keep that 12 so that an Oklahoma who may finish second or even third in their own half of the division still has an outside chance to make the playoffs. So I imagine that they're going to want all the teams in at that point. So I think 12 is still probably a pretty solid number. And maybe it's even higher at some point. I don't know. Yeah,
12, I think that will stay. The thing that hasn't been signed yet and that may change is the guarantee of conference champions. They were saying top 6 conference champions. They may lower that now that there's no Big 12. That may go down to 5. It may go down to 4. Who knows what they're going to do with that? And then the home games, the first round buys, all that stuff still needs to be worked out too.
We've been talking about money in the American, $7 million per school, and that it's 5 times that, right, for the Big 12. No matter how this shakes out, unless all 8 of those schools end up in the Pac-12, ACC, Big 10, they stand to lose a lot in TV revenue, right? So for a UCF, maybe you triple it. Maybe you go to $20 million, $21 million. But if you're one of those schools and you've banked on $35, $40 million a year and you're down to $20 million, let's see who they hire and let's see about some of their facility upgrades. That's a different world for them. Welcome to what the rest of college football looks like when you're not getting those sorts of TV dollars. At Mike WEI55, if you gave Terry Mohajir and or Gus Malzahn truth serum right now, but you could only ask him one question, what would your question be? I responded to him on Twitter saying, Mike has already stolen my question with the tank top question to Coach Malzahn. So truth serum, what would you ask? They have to answer you. Adam.
Yeah, I think I'd want to ask Mohajir something about this conference part, right? Is it realistic that UCF is playing in a new conference in the next 2 years, and kind of get a sense for that? If I had more intel, I may ask a more pointed question like, will UCF be in the ACC or the SEC? But I think it'd be something along those lines. For Malzahn, I think I would honestly like to know, will he be staying at UCF long term? Does he see this as a stepping stone? Does he see this as a couple-year opportunity and all of a sudden another big school opens and he wants to take that? So I guess Malzahn, I'd wonder his intentions, his long-term plans at UCF.
You took my answers directly right off my page. Yet Malzahn has said all the exact same right things. If anybody would come here and stay here and build it, blah, 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 blah. Does he actually plan on doing that? Because the last 2 coaches have been here and gone in 2 and 3 years.
I would like to ask Terry Mohajir what he really thinks of what's been left behind by Danny White. Does he hold him in some level of admiration, or by some of his pointed comments that you saw in the news release related to scheduling, in which he laid out what were my options: schedule 11 games, schedule 2 FCS, or play a road game at Florida. It seems like he didn't like what he inherited and has taken some shots. So I'd like to know what he really thinks. And I have to echo that, right? Gus Malzahn has said all the right things, right? That's what he's going to do. But you know what? In fairness to him, maybe he doesn't know what the future will bring. You know, if the future of college football is there and UCF is in this reconfigured league that has the automatic qualifying and the playoffs, maybe he is right where he needs to be at this point in his career. Our buddy JP Gilbert asking, coaches will be asked about vaccination rates during AAC Media Days. Mike, you asked about it for Boise State, a good question. Who do you think will have the highest vaccination rate in the AAC, and who will have the lowest? He also said predict UCF's Gus Malzahn in an interview with the Orlando Sentinel, saying 70-something was his answer, not specific, but highest and lowest when if they answer truthfully next week during media days.
So which AAC school will have the highest vaccination rate is the question.
And lowest.
Man, lowest. Lowest, give me, I don't know, give me Houston. Highest, I feel like Cincinnati, just because they're always like, oh, we're the best, we do all this stuff too, even though it's an interesting political state. But give me Cincinnati as the highest.
Yeah, I just throw out one of those Texas schools as one of the lowest, or one of the Florida schools. 70% is not as high as we'd like it to be. You know how angry people are going to be if we have to forfeit a game this year, or if this first game doesn't get played because either us or Boise doesn't have enough guys that are clear to play. There's going to be a riot in the streets. I hate to break it to you guys. I don't know what's going to happen. If there's one game that we can afford, I guess, to get canceled, it'd be the UConn game, right? If you had to pick one, I think people would still assume that we would win that. That wouldn't hurt us long-term in the rankings or anything like that.
Put me down for Navy having the highest vaccination rate, even though not required yet of military personnel to have the vaccine. And I'm going to go with Tulsa in Oklahoma as the lowest rate. But certainly the Texas, the Floridas, heck, Ohio could certainly be in the mix there. At Rejoice Nights, what's up with stadium sponsorship? We saw some rumors of that on social media. That naming rights might come out soon. Nothing so far this week on it, but if it's being rumored by shareholder society members, it seems like they have a little bit of inside information that something's coming.
Yeah, our apologies. Mike and I were supposed to meet with him last week to sign the paperwork for Suns UCF Stadium. We got tied up with something else. We're going to work on it soon enough. Mike's been busy. I've got some stuff going on, but we promise we'll get the paperwork signed soon for Suns UCF Stadium. So just sit tight.
Yeah, I know what the answer is. I think some other people here know what the answer is. UCF hasn't released it yet, so I'm not going to release it yet either.
This is the same guy who in the dungeon said he had all the answers to what the Big Ten was doing as clickbait. Listen to the podcast. And you don't want to reveal your insider information now?
The old bait and switch that a lot of people got angry about. But
Yes.
all in good fun. Hey, I think we got more attention and clicks on that than we've ever had on any of our show postings before. So whatever, I'll take it.
That just seems like a green light for you to be more inflammatory next week. At E.T. Johnson 4, what's going on with the kicking game? You alluded to this during the pod, that it was a question mark that you had going into the season. Concerns after the spring game. I haven't heard anything of, he says, anything being done. I don't know that we're going to get a lot of clarity, certainly from coaching staff, but it is an area to watch, right? Is that kicking game, special teams, you talk about it, hypelism, all three phases of the game there. We didn't see enough of that in a positive direction during 2020. That is an area that'll get lost in the shuffle here over the next couple of weeks, but it's going to be very important and may prove to be important in a close game perhaps with Boise.
Hopefully something's going on with the kicking game, because obviously last year in the spring game was not as consistent as we all wanted to see. So Riker Casey comes in as a transfer, obviously applies some pressure to Daniel Obarski. We know Obarski has the leg. We've seen him kick distance, but straight, not so much. So hopefully something is going on from a kicking perspective. Riker Casey seems to have a big leg, but again, he's another guy. I don't know that he's been tested in real life football action at the college level. So So I think we've got 2 unknowns in the kicking game. I know there's a couple other kickers that we have been floating around. Chris Boniel, I think, was one of them. And there's a kid from Arizona State who had thought about coming to UCF. They're not on the roster right now, so I'm not sure where all that stands. But this tells me that Gus is trying to round up as many people. It's like an NFL tryout. Bring as many kickers in as you can and give the job to Al Del Greco, right? It seems like that's what we're trying to do here for UCF.
Yeah, we've already got another kid lined up for next year. Was his name Colton Boomer? So, but Riker Casey is a kickoff specialist. I think that's all he basically did at his last stop. And he's known for kicking the ball through the end zone and not out of bounds. So I could see him being the at least kickoff specialist. And if he wins the actual kicking job, I wouldn't be surprised with that either.
Paging a Zendejas brother, any Zendejas brothers.
Are there any grammaticas? Are there any grammaticas left that we can steal?
At Zeebel's UCF, the year is 2040. Gus Malzahn has just won UCF its 7th national championship, and with a heavy heart retires to coaching Valhalla. Which UCF great would you be most excited to see take the head coaching job? Gus Bus to Bortles boat? I'm going to go with, and we've talked about this before, I know you've talked and speculated on the show, Kevin Smith. There's a coach that I could see down the line for UCF, Kevin Smith.
Yeah, I think the obvious answer that people are thinking about here is Mackenzie Milton. I think it's probably where people are going. So I'll stay off the board. Actually, big congrats first off to Josh Linham, who just got named to the defensive staff at Georgia Tech. He was at Jacksonville State for a long time. He was on the show with Mike and I a while back. Brian Waters, who we just had on a few weeks ago, he's now moving over. I think it's Northern Oklahoma is where he's heading to. It sounds beautiful this time of year. I am going to go with Trey Nixon. I have no idea why. He was really personable on the show when he was on with Mike and I. He's got a really good personality. He's seen a lot of offense. Seems like a really nice guy. Would run a clean program. I'm going to go Trey Nixon as our 2040 UCF head coach.
This is 20 years down the road, 10 years after we play the Gators at home. Nobody freaking knows. It's somebody we've never heard of yet, right? Somebody that probably hasn't even stepped foot on campus yet. And 20 years from now, there'll be 40, a young hotshot coach. I don't know. Josh Lanham is a good name. He's still a young guy. By then, he'll be, I don't know, 50, 60 years old. So
I like that 10 years after the Gator home game. You went back in the Wayback Machine to the late 80s with your guest this week, running back Mark Giacone. I enjoyed the interview. I like when he's talked about making sauce for his guys.
Gravy.
Feeding gravy. I like that. I like that he's looking out for his guys with some cooking.
Listen, Mike and I love having the older alumni guys on because a lot of folks obviously found UCF probably in the early 2000s and beyond, but there's a whole host of guys that played prior to that, names that you probably saw in the NFL, guys who gave their blood, sweat, and tears. You heard Mark Giacone talk about the conditions. He referenced concussions a bunch of times, which is obviously a very sad topic, and kind of the sea change you've seen there as well. So anytime we can get one of the legends of UCF on to talk about what it was like back in the day, we always want to take that opportunity, and we appreciate Mark giving some insight, and not a lot of tapes are available of that Youngstown State game in 1990, or the noise penalty game in 1988. But it's always good to have somebody on who can give us some insight as to what that was like.
Yeah, Adam and I consider ourselves older fans because we've been around for over 20 years. 98. Were you around, Trace, for that 1990 season?
That was before. It was right around the time I arrived on campus, so I do remember that time frame. What I had forgotten that you guys pointed out was the UCF's 1-10 against Georgia Southern all time. Ugh. Perhaps that's some future home and homes on the schedule. We can maybe even things out. Just keep scheduling Georgia Southern year after year.
If we schedule home and home with Georgia, our fans will go nuts. We need a 3-for-1 with Georgia Southern, or else people are going to go just ballistic in the dungeon.
We do have a home game coming up with Liberty, and we mentioned a game against Liberty with Mark on that podcast. Liberty, I think, is next season or the season after. There's a home game coming up.
Yeah, but we are just 35 days away until the home opener against Boise State, COVID pending, of course. And next week, preseason camp begins, UCF Media Day, AAC Media Days. Message us. What sort of questions would you like to ask of Coach Malzahn, Dylan Gabriel, Kalia Davis? Perhaps we'll have Big Cat. It says 8 to 10 UCF players. I think I know what Mike wants to know from Daniel Obarski. If they bring him out, I don't expect that they will, but I'll be ready to ask Mike's tough questions of Daniel Obarski. Send us your messages. Let us know what questions you want to ask of players, and perhaps we'll have some sound of that on twonightsmedia.com and on next week's show. Should be good. I'm genuinely excited now with all of this buzz about conference realignment, which for UCF is probably not going to get decided in the next couple of days. Training camp is getting underway, and that's good stuff.
Yeah, we are here. We made it through June and July. We're typically the dog days of summer where on our podcast shows, we're rolling out the Mount Rushmore stuff again. And every now and again, we try to fix baseball. We're going right back into the Wayback Machine. This summer's been action-packed with stuff, which has been fantastic. But this is our last July show. The next time you're talking to Mike and I and Trace, we're talking camps. We're talking depth charts. We're talking position battles. And nothing is funner than that, too. So we've made it through the doldrums. To Mike's point at the top, there's been so much to talk about. So congrats to all of you for making it with us. We appreciate you coming along the ride with us. And we finally made it. We're here. We're almost a month away. Next time we talk, we'll be less than a month away from our first game. And there's no better time than that part of the season because everybody's undefeated and everyone's going all the way. And there's no better optimism than right before the season kicks off.
I can't wait to hear Trace ask Coach Malzahn if he's already picked out his tank tops for the sideline. Is he going regular tank top? Is he going cut-off sleeves? What's the deal?
I'm going to ask what he's doing with his Oreo cookies, and then I'll get tossed out of the media room. Yeah. This was episode 27. Next week, episode 28, 28 days away, just 7 days from now. A lot of numbers there. Guys, it has been fun. Enjoyed learning a little bit more about Boise State and answering all of your questions. I'm Trace Trelko. Go Knights!
Charge on!
Let's charge on, everybody.